We got to be careful about calling things when we have like 991 votes separating the two candidates and a quarter of the vote yet to count. Even if they have made it on the basis of select precincts, I'd be very cautious about intruding into this process.
Rove was supremely confident that the numbers coming in from Ohio throughout the night that favored President Obama were not indicative of who would win Ohio when all the votes were ultimately tabulated by that state's computers. With a quarter of the vote still out there, Rove was anticipating a shift to the right just after 11 p.m., which, coincidentally, is exactly what happened in 2004. That year, John Kerry and the entire nation, especially Karl Rove, were watching Ohio just after the 11 p.m. hour. Florida had just been called for George W. Bush, and according to the Electoral College math, whoever won Ohio would win the election. And considering that exit polls from the state showed John Kerry with a substantial lead in Ohio, there were a lot of tense moments for Karl Rove and the Republicans that night. Then the clock struck 11:14 p.m., and the servers counting the votes in Ohio crashed. Now, election officials in Ohio had planned for this sort of thing to happen. They had already contracted with a company in Chattanooga, Tennessee called SmartTech to be their backup, their fail-safe, should the Ohio servers crash and go down. As journalist Craig Unger lays bare in his book, Boss Rove, SmartTech was drenched in Republican politics. One of the early founders of the company was a man named Mercer Reynolds, who used to be the finance chairman of the Republican Party. SmartTech's top client was none other than the Bush-Cheney campaign itself, and SmartTech also used to do work for Jeb Bush and the Republican National Committee. And it was Ohio's Republican Secretary of State Ken Blackwell who made sure that SmartTech got the contract to count the votes on election night if the Ohio servers crashed, which they did at exactly 11:14 p.m. 60 long seconds later, the servers came back up in Ohio. But now with the vote rerouted through SmartTech in Chattanooga, and Bush's prospect for re-election were suddenly a lot brighter. The vote totals that poured into the system from SmartTech's computers in Chattanooga flipped the exit polls on their head. The lead that John Kerry had in the exit polls had magically reversed by more than 6%, something unheard of in any other nation in the developed world, giving Bush the win in Ohio and thus the presidency for another 4 years. Unger further explains in his book that the only independent analysis of what happened in Ohio was done by Richard Hayes Phillips and published in the book Witness to a Crime. Phillips and his team analyzed more than 120,000 ballots, 127 poll books, and 141 signature books from Ohio's 2004 election. Phillips found 0 irregularities in vote totals from all the counties that reported results before the servers crashed at 11:14 p.m. But of the 14 counties that came in after Ohio's election computers were reset by SmartTech's computers in Chattanooga at 11:14 p.m., of the ones that came in after that, every single one of them showed voter irregularities, and all of those irregularities favored George W. Bush. For example, consider Cleveland's 4th Ward. In 2000, Al Gore won 95% of that vote in the 4th Ward, in that ward. But in 2004, the county reported its results after the 11:14 p.m. crash, and it showed that Kerry had only won 59% of the vote, a 35% drop without any explanation. There were several other abnormalities across Ohio's post-server crash that accumulated to deliver that state to Bush. John Kerry never protested the election, and to this day, these 2004 voter abnormalities have never been addressed.